guys, welcome back. This week we're doing book club and I've got some really cool books. So this week's book club is all about self-help and productivity. I know that currently there's a huge trend of reading self-help books. Lots of people are reading them. So I thought I'd review a couple of books which I've read in the past and kind of guide you guys which ones have been helpful and which have been not so helpful. Okay, so if you know me, you know that I'm obsessed with Marie Kondo. If you watch this video, you know I never hesitate to mention Marie Kondo and her brand. These two books, I've got the first book, which is, there we go, that is the first book. But this one is The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up with Marie Kondo. This book was definitely a life changer. If you guys haven't heard about her, She's got a Netflix series and I think she's got two series now. The first one is just basically her going to people's homes and helping them clean and declutter. And the second one is, I think she's helping businesses declutter and kind of allowing them to be more efficient. I still watch it in the background sometimes just as a feel-good type thing when I'm feeling low and when I feel like my mind is a bit cluttered. I'm going to be very honest. I loved her concept. I actually watched the Netflix series before I read the book. I haven't read the first book in that much detail because I love the concept of it, and they kind of teach you the basic principles and strategies in the Netflix documentary. So I basically use the strategies to redo my life. Like everyone else during lockdown, I basically read her book and cleaned everything inside out, decluttered the house, and it definitely was a huge change because I see that now in my life. I see the small things. It's been work-wise and personal as well, so I'm a huge fan. And those of you who think that it's not technically a productivity book, it totally is, and I'll tell you why. Because I think once you clean out your life, your physical clutter, you can basically start to think about the other things and the rest of your life, and it's been really quite helpful to see which parts of my life are lacking and where I'm not reaching my goals, and decluttering my house and just general my space and kind of organizing it the way I need it to be has been really helpful and definitely life-changing. That was her first book. Now her second book, this is it. So it's Joy at Work. And this is with Marie Kondo and the psychologist Scott Sonnenschein. She's written the book with him. So Joy at Work actually came out much later. Yeah, so it actually came out at the right time. So it came out in 2020. So it was right when my freelance stuff had actually completely ended and I was kind of freaking out. It was lockdown, I wasn't getting any clients, I didn't know what I was meant to do, and I didn't have any work. So I actually ordered the book and it arrived, and I was so grateful that it actually arrived because I wasn't quite sure with everything that was going on. And when I tell you that this book was probably the most productive and life-changing book I have ever read. So when I read this book, it was really helpful. Prior to 2019, if you looked at my phone, I probably would have had 2,000 to 3,000 unchecked emails, and it was all written there. You could see the little red sign. And yes, I unfortunately was that annoying person. And when I read this book, there's a whole section of digital clutter which talks about how there's not just physical clutter, you also have to think about the digital clutter in your life. And I genuinely never really thought about it, and I never really thought about digital clutter like with that much detail. I guess I kind of just went on with life. I had all this digital clutter which I never thought about. The book is actually divided in two parts. The first part is by Marie Kondo and her research and her principles and strategies on how to organize the digital clutter and how to find joy at work. So she also talks about how she had clients in Japan who she'd helped clean out their office desks, and once they cleaned out their office desks, they realized that either they didn't want to work or they were a little more productive. They were a little more productive in their work. They were hitting their sales targets better than before. So I was really inspired by all her stories, and I thought I basically applied it to my own life. It did actually help. I cleared out everything, cleared out my desk. If you guys want, I'll do a quick desk tour, so if you are interested, please comment down below and let me know that you would like to see a desk setup tour. It's very basic and very minimal in terms of what I have, but yeah, I will do a quick desk tour if you guys are interested. And the second part of the book is basically about Scott Sonnenschein. He basically gives us a lot of information from his organizational psychology background. There's things that he picks up from research and just his own experience as well, which is really helpful to see from an academic point of view, to see how digital clutter and physical clutter actually affect your mental health and your day-to-day living. I basically set up a system for myself, which I still use to this day, and since I've done the clear out in 2019, my physical and digital clutter has never been as bad as it used to be. So everything is very organized and in its place, and yeah, it's just really organized, which is exactly the way I like it. And when it does get a little bit messy, it doesn't bother me as much because I know how to organize it and I have a system and I know what I need, and everything is easy access. From a personal point of view, the first book was helpful, but it wasn't as helpful as Joy at Work. So if you don't know her work, I would recommend that you read Joy at Work first, because I think that's where you're going to get the most value in terms of what her strategies are. But equally, I think both books are pretty good. I just found Joy at Work much more useful, probably because I needed my work life sorted out. When I basically completed Joy at Work, I definitely felt more organized and I definitely had more confidence to apply for jobs, which I didn't feel like I was qualified for before, but now I definitely have that confidence. And I definitely have more confidence in terms of doing things like this YouTube channel, doing a Substack newsletter, posting on my Instagram every single day and creating content. I'm definitely much more confident within my own self and definitely much more productive in terms of what I'm putting out there, which I hopefully you're liking. And I would really recommend that you buy both of the books, but start with Joy at Work. So the next three books, these three books are kind of part series, if you can see that now. Yeah, so they're basically series, three series, written by different people, but they're pretty much similar. They talk a lot about the Japanese philosophy of Ikigai, which I'm sure everyone's heard by now because it's huge, and it's actually really helpful. And then another book which is called Wabi, Sabi, and then the third one which is Master the Art of Simple Living. So the first one, which is Ikigai, I think it's by Hector, Garcia and Francis Miralles, and it's basically an international bestseller, so you can't miss it. You can buy it off Amazon or anywhere. It basically just talks to you about Ikigai, and Ikigai means flow state. When I read this book, a lot of missing puzzles in terms of my work and what I was doing kind of connected. I could see which ones were giving me inner peace and inner calm. Writing is one of them. And I talk a little bit more about the connection with Ikigai and flow state. I talk a lot about the connection with Ikigai and flow state in more detail in my other video. I will link it in the video. The second one is, it's called Zen, The Art of Simple Living by Shunmyo Masuno. And it's a best-selling author. There you go. I love the cover and how she's just sitting there in the middle of nature on this swimming pool plank. It's just really zen. Yeah, so it says it's from the Japanese best-selling author, and it basically just has lots of philosophies and strategies on how to live a simple life and how to make your life less stressful. So again, it helps me on a day-to-day basis. So when I get stressed or when I'm anxious, I use some of the techniques and I've applied them to my life. And the third one of the series is basically called Wabi Sabi, and it's the Japanese wisdom for a perfectly imperfect life by Beth Kempton. There's the book. That's how it looks. Hopefully you can see it properly. There we go. And again, it's just really simple Japanese art it's really simple Japanese art, which I love. But yeah, it's kind of like a gold, and it's got that beautiful little bird, and it's got some Japanese writing at the top. I love all 3 of the series actually. I think all 3 of the covers are really, really cool, and I think they've been quite helpful. So if you're looking for self-help stuff, the Japanese philosophy, these 3 books are definitely your first buy if you're looking to delve into Japanese philosophy. I still reread, and I reread every year, sometimes a couple of times a month. If it's a really stressful month, I will pick these up and read them. So yeah, Wabi Sabi is basically the concept of, it's a Japanese concept which basically says that nothing is perfect. It's just a really beautiful philosophy, and it's a really beautiful and different way of thinking about your life. So if you're struggling, I would suggest these 3 books are definitely a must. So continuation of the self-help books. This one, The Year of Less. So this book basically talks a lot about this woman who decided to give up shopping and just lived with less clothes, didn't buy anything for a whole year, and book is basically an account of what her life was like and what she learned after not shopping for a whole year. So when I read this book, I was an absolute shopaholic, and I just thought, you know what, let me give it a try, because I read and I wasn't disappointed. There was some parts in the story that I don't relate to. However, the overall goal where she talks about shopping less and the fact that things shouldn't really mean anything, she just buys less, and she basically figured out that things are just things, and at the end of the day, people are the most important thing in your life, and having relationships and cultivating those type of relationships are much more important than having a relationship with your wardrobe. Now, I don't entirely agree with that, because I do think that some objects do have sentimental value. I definitely have objects at home that I feel have sentimental value, and specifically outfits and clothes which I've worn on specific days, and I just don't want to get rid of them. However, the whole concept is actually fine. So I did actually start shopping less once I read this book. But yeah, if you're a shopaholic and you're thinking about sorting out your wardrobe and your buying habits, then I would recommend buying this book in terms of just to figure out what you don't need in your life. So this book by Ellen Petri-Liaz, it was a bit of an eye-opener for me. I read this book and it was actually really helpful. She backs up her concepts and strategies with research, which is always great. And there's some really great quotes in there. There's some quotes from Maya Angelou in there, and there's explanations on how your brain works and things like that. So it's actually quite a good book, which I would recommend. It's called The Happiness Hack, and I'm sure you can buy it off Amazon. But yes, I would highly recommend it. It was really helpful, and I felt like the research and the strategies in there actually helped me put my life back on track. So it's definitely a recommended must. It's a short book, so it's not too long, and you could pretty much get through it within a week if you have time. So yes, I would highly recommend this book. So the next one is New York Times bestseller by Jen Sencero. I think I'm saying, yes, I am saying it right. Jen Sencero, and it's called You Are a Badass: How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life. I had really high hopes for this book. However, I was a little bit disappointed. I felt like there was a lot of generic things that she kind of adds in there, where I just felt like it was a bit too generic. Maybe I'll read it again and I'll find something new. But when I first read this book, I didn't feel like it was that helpful. Now bear in mind, I was probably down to like 10 to 15 self-help and productivity books by the time I got to this book. So maybe I just got sick of reading the same stuff again and again, but it was a little underwhelming personally for me. But it's a New York Times bestseller, and there are some concepts in there. If you're new to self-help and productivity books and self-improvement books, then I think it's definitely a read, because there are some interesting things in there. There's stuff about meditation and how to stop and forgiving yourself and letting the love in, and all those nice concepts that you want to hear when you're wanting to improve yourself and wanting to love yourself a little bit more. So yes, personally it wasn't really for me, but if you're just starting out, I would recommend maybe give this book a read. This book literally needs no introduction. Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's literally the Bible of changing habits, and you can see I've got my little annotations there because there's so much in this book that's been helpful. As you can see, I've pretty much highlighted everything. I found it really, really helpful. So with this book, I think the hype definitely is worth it. There's a lot of books that I've read where the hype wasn't worth it, but this one is definitely worth it. So I would say overall this was a good investment. I've changed a lot of my habits by reading this, and obviously he talks about habit stacking, which is by far life-changing and probably the most life-changing advice I've ever gotten from a book. And yay for James Clear, because he's an absolute freaking genius for writing this book. And I love that his again, the strategies are, he's given a lot of strategies, and basically there's a lot on discipline, but his strategies are also backed up by science and research, which is great. And then he talks about his own experience as well, and it's really nice because there's not too much factual stuff, and not a lot of it is research, but doesn't read like research like a lot of the recent ones. It's just a really, really good book, and I cannot recommend this enough. So there was a huge hype about this book, which is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housal. I'm going to be really honest, some of the stuff actually made me really depressed. So when I was looking at the stuff about investing, he was talking about how the younger you invest, the easier it is to make your million or make a fortune. And every time I read stuff like that, personally, it makes me really, really depressed because I haven't started and my money management is literally so bad. I'm definitely trying to improve it, but my money management habits are really, really bad. And when I read this book, I basically the goal of me reading this book was to make me feel a little bit more positive about my money and a little bit positive about building wealth and building a stable income for myself. But for some reason, for me, it kind of went the opposite way, and I just felt like a lot of it just kept saying that everything that you do has to start when you're younger. And I'm already in my mid-30s, and I was like, well, I clearly have missed the boat. So I didn't quite like the way that it was presented. However, the strategies in it are actually quite good. So the budgeting strategies, you have a couple of rules on how to budget, how to invest, and there's a bunch of stories, but unfortunately this book just didn't do it for me. I know there's a lot of people out there that probably will say that I'm crazy and this book is one of the more helpful books. It's over 1 million copies sold, but I personally just didn't find it very helpful. So another no introduction book is The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and this book is literally a godsend. I learned so much from this book. Tim Ferriss, again, an absolute genius. He also does a podcast as well, which I sometimes listen to, and he goes onto podcasts and talks about his book and the strategies that he's written about. So if you guys are interested, I think you can check him out on YouTube. The strategies that I found really good. So as you can see, again, I've annotated so much that I've highlighted, and I've written notes down as well. Relevant information. I think it's such a good book, and Tim Ferriss is an absolute genius because it's so relevant. I think it's actually a timeless book. So this is something that you can read 20, 30 years down the line, and I think it would still be relevant because the strategies are really, really practical. What I loved about the book, and the main thing that I took away from the book, was how to get a raise, but within the corporate division I had to negotiate my value a little bit more. And this, if you're anything like me, this book will really help you with that. So yeah, this is definitely a 10 on 10. So if you're into the whole productivity and self-improvement books, you've definitely heard of Ali Abdaal, who's got a podcast called Deep Dive. He's a Cambridge medical graduate, and he has a YouTube channel where he talks a lot about productivity, improvement, how to make money, and lots of different practical, he just gives lots of practical advice, stuff that you don't learn in school, and skills that can help you upgrade your life and upgrade your work and upgrade your side businesses. Ali Abdaal has come out with a new book last year, Feel Good Productivity. Okay, so I have a lot to say about this book, and I will make a separate video about it, just specifically going in, deep diving into his book and talking about what I felt was good and what I felt was not relevant or helpful towards me. But in general, the whole concept of this idea is actually really good, because being productive and self-movement can be subjective. So again, you can see I've got my little markers up here. This is one of the things that I love. So it says, by adding a side quest to your day, you create space for curiosity, exploration, and playfulness, and could discover something amazing and totally unexpected along the way. That short paragraph pretty much sums up what the concept of feel-good productivity is. I find the book really helpful. I did feel like there was a lot of information. There's a lot of factual information, lots of research, lots of science behind the strategies and tools and tips and strategies. And there's lots of stories about different companies and things like that. There's a famous one which I think almost everyone knows by now. Netflix actually went to Blockbuster and tried to sell their company, but Blockbuster actually rejected Netflix, and now Netflix is this huge streaming service which everybody loves worldwide, and nobody's really heard of Blockbusters because it's completely wiped out. So that story and other really iconic stories in this book, which are really fun to read, and it's good to learn from the different business stories that are out there and from the past. I really enjoyed the book. I personally really enjoyed the book. I thought, again, it's about time somebody wrote about how productivity can be fun, and it doesn't have to be tedious, it doesn't have to be boring, and you can make it really fun. I personally find it really fun when I change my tools and strategies when it comes to productivity or self-improvement, and I like to see and measure what helps and what doesn't, and I think anyone who's working will be able to relate to that. And it works in academia and it works if you're working, so it's definitely helpful. I would definitely say it's a 9 out of 10. This book is definitely a must read in the self-improvement list. This book, The Discomfort Zone by Farrah Storr, I love this book and I love Farrah. So a little bit about her background. So Farrah Storr basically was the editor of Cosmopolitan UK, and I think she worked there for a couple of years. She's a graduate of King's College University. She had no background experience when she got the job as an editor, and basically worked there for a really long time. And I think she was also, I forget, but I think she also worked from Women's Health as well. I'm not quite sure. It was a while since I read that, but yeah, I think she worked for Women's Health magazine as well. But she's been basically worked as an editor, and this is about her experience and her life of getting what you want. And it's a really good one because you rarely see women who talk about productivity, generally quite male dominated. But yeah, it's a rare insight into the whole magazine publishing world, and as a magazine journalist, I obviously find it quite interesting, and I loved it. I really loved the book. Again, it has a lot of really good strategies. So she talks a lot about perfectionism, which most self-help books talk about, but there's a lot of really fun stories of her experience and how she didn't have the experience when she came on as an editor, but she did the work and she was able to do what she did. Yeah, and it's just a great book. And basically she talks about how you should get out of your comfort zone to improve yourself, and it's always worth it. So definitely this book was a 10 out of 10 for me. I loved it, and I'll probably read it again at some point. Okay, last but not least, definitely one of my favorite books of all time in terms of self-improvement and productivity, and Deep Work by Newport. As you can see, again, I don't have that many markings, but that's because it's all in here. I've literally memorized this book. But yeah, there's some really cool stuff in here. So he talks about, as you can see, I've pretty much highlighted everything. So yeah, there's so many different philosophies in this book that it's just ridiculous. It talks about ways of writing, it talks about how to do deep work, it talks about how you can create tools and strategies to focus better. And I promise you, I've tried a bunch of the strategies and they've been really helpful. One of them that I've used is creating a desk space for myself and creating like creating a more free workflow space. So you design your environment for the intention that you want out of it. And ever since I set up my desk space, I think I've definitely been more productive. I've been writing more and I just get the work done, and there's less procrastination, all thanks to this book. Definitely this is a 10 on 10 book, and I highly recommend that you buy this as part of your productivity list. So that's all for this week. I hope some of the books that I've mentioned are helpful. I will link all of them down below. If you have any questions about any of the videos or anything that I talk about, you can always send me an email, which again I will link down below. If you watched till the end, thank you so much for watching, and I'm very grateful for each and every single one of you who has watched my video and feel that I'm special enough for you to watch until the end. If you're new here, please subscribe and like my videos, and please comment on anything that you feel that you want to comment on, and I'll see you next week.